Welcome back to the Midnight Tapes. Get comfortable. Turn the lights down low, pull the blanket up, and let the sound of the winter storm settle in around you. Tonight, all 8 stories come from the dead of winter. From the nights when the snow comes down so hard it cuts you off from the world, when the roads close, the power flickers, and you are left alone in the warm small circle of your light, while the white dark presses in at every window. There is a particular silence to being snowed in. The whole world goes muffled and soft and still, every sound swallowed by the snow. And in that deep stillness, anyone who has lived through it will tell you, it becomes very easy to feel that the silence is not empty. That something is out there in the white, standing very still, being just as quiet as the snow. Winter horror is different from summer horror. In summer, the dark feels alive. It moves with insects and warm wind and things hidden in tall grass. In winter, the dark feels preserved. It feels patient. The cold does not chase you. It waits for you to make one mistake. A door left unlatched. A window looked through for too long. A voice answered when no voice should have been possible. The snow makes everything beautiful, but it also hides distance, hides direction, hides tracks until you notice the wrong ones. These came from people who were snowed in one winter, and were not as alone as they wished to be. People in cabins, on mountain trails, beside frozen lakes, and in villages so old that the winter rules were older than the houses themselves. You do not have to stay awake for all of them. Let your eyes close whenever they want to. You are warm tonight, and safe, and the storm is only a sound. The door is locked. The dark is just the dark. Just do not open it, no matter who is knocking out of the cold. Let's begin. The storm is still moving against the glass. Stay with me. Here is the first tape. The tracks that circle the house. We had a place out in the country, fairly remote, the kind of spot that gets properly snowed in when a big storm comes through. We loved it. There's nothing cozier than being warm inside with a fire going while the snow piles up outside and the world goes white and silent. That winter, a huge storm came, dumped 2 feet overnight, and sealed us in good. We didn't mind. We had food, heat each other. We slept well that first night, snug while the storm raged. In the morning the storm had passed, and the world was blinding white and perfectly still. And in the fresh untouched snow around our house, there were tracks. Footprints. They circled the house, a complete loop, all the way around, in the deep new snow. Someone, or something, had walked a full circle around our home in the night, in the middle of the blizzard, around and around. Because it wasn't just one loop. Looking closer, the tracks went around many times, a deep worn path, circling the house, made by something that had walked round and round and round us all night while we slept, while the snow fell. The tracks never approached the door, never came to a window. They just circled, round and round, all night, in the storm, an unbroken path worn into the snow around the house that held us. And the prints themselves, we didn't look at them too closely, my partner and I, because we didn't like what we started to see. They were bare feet, in 2 feet of snow, in a blizzard, circling our house all night. No one survives a night barefoot in a blizzard. No one makes that many circuits of a house in a storm. But the tracks were there, deep and clear and endless, and they had walked all night, just outside the walls, just beyond the warm circle of our sleep. We left the next day, the moment the road was clear enough to risk. We never spent another winter night there. But here is the detail I've never been able to shake, the one that comes back to me on snowy nights. The path circled the house clockwise, except at one point, at our bedroom window, the window we slept behind. There, and only there, the tracks stopped. The circling feet had halted outside our bedroom window, and stood, for a while, judging by how the snow was packed down. Stood, and faced the glass, and waited, outside the window we slept behind, before resuming their endless patient circles around the warm sleeping house in the storm. The thing about that house was that it felt safest in winter. In summer it was only a small country place with fields around it, and a line of old trees beyond the barn, but in winter it became a separate world. The snow softened the broken fence posts, hid the old tire ruts in the lane, and made the dark woods look farther away than they really were. When the stove was lit and the windows were fogged at the edges, it felt like nothing outside could matter. That was part of why we loved it. We went there to feel cut off. The first night of that storm, we watched the weather turn serious in stages. At dusk the flakes were light and harmless, drifting through the porch light. By 9, the wind had started to push them sideways. By midnight, the whole house was creaking under the pressure of it. Snow hissed against the windows. The chimney moaned. Every so often, a heavier gust would throw a handful of ice against the siding and make us look up from our books. But it was the good kind of fear at first. The kind you invite in when you know you have candles and dry wood and enough food for a week. We checked the doors before bed. That detail matters to me now, because I remember doing it. I remember sliding the bolt on the back door, pressing my palm against the front door to make sure the latch had caught, and lowering the little hook on the cellar entrance. My partner laughed at me for being dramatic, but I was not frightened then. It was habit. Country houses settle and knock and open themselves if you let them. I wanted everything closed against the storm, and when I went upstairs, I believed it was. Sometime in the night I woke to a sound I could not place. Not loud. Not even strange enough to make me sit up. A soft repeated brushing, somewhere outside, around the lower wall of the house. I lay still, listening through the wind. At first I thought it was a branch dragging along the siding. Then I remembered there were no trees close enough on that side. The sound passed under the bedroom window and faded along the far wall. I told myself it was snow sliding from the roof. I told myself the house was old. I told myself every reasonable thing, and because the room was warm and my partner was breathing beside me, I fell back asleep. In the morning the storm had made the world look newly created. The sky was pale and washed clean, the fields had disappeared into one smooth white sheet, and the lane was gone completely. There was that blinding quiet that comes after a heavy snow, when the air itself seems padded. I remember opening the front door and smiling at first, because the drift on the porch had climbed almost to the step. Then my eyes moved beyond it, to the yard, and the smile left me. The path around the house was not the kind of thing you could misunderstand. It was too deliberate. In a normal snowfall, tracks wander. They approach things, turn away, stop, overlap, disappear where a person climbs onto a porch or steps over a low wall. These did none of that. They made a clean ring around the house, like someone had tied a rope to the center and walked at the end of it. The circle was carved into the new snow, dark at the bottom where the weight had pressed through to the frozen ground. We stood in the doorway without moving for a long time. Neither of us wanted to be first to say what we were seeing. Finally my partner put on boots and went out, not toward the tracks at first, but toward the woodpile, as if the ordinary chore could make the rest of the yard ordinary too. I followed. The air bit the inside of my nose. The snow was deep enough that every step was work, but the ring around the house was packed down hard. Something had made that path easy by walking it again and again. The bare feet were the worst part, but not the first worst part. First it was the repetition. The prints were layered, heel over heel, toe over toe, not one trip around but many. At some places the circle was almost a trench. The snow had filled in between passes and then been pressed down again. Whoever had walked there had done so while the storm was still falling heavily. They had not come after it cleared. They had been there through the worst of it, moving steadily in the whiteout while we slept. Only after that did we let ourselves look closely at the shape of the prints. Human enough to be recognized, wrong enough to make the recognition sickening. Long toes. Deep heel marks. No tread. No boot pattern. Bare skin and snow that had frozen the porch railing solid. I remember my partner whispering that maybe someone had been drunk, lost, confused from exposure. But lost people do not circle houses without trying the door. Lost people do not avoid every window except one. Lost people fall down. They crawl. They leave handprints. They bleed. These were steady. Patient. Almost neat. We followed the ring once. It felt like walking the boundary of something that had been drawn around us. At the front door, the tracks passed by without turning in. At the back door, the same. At the cellar steps, the same. Not once did they angle toward a way inside. That should have comforted me. It did not. It felt less like something had failed to enter and more like something had not needed to. Or like entering had never been the point. The point had been to walk the shape of us. To measure the walls. To keep the house inside its circle until morning. Then we reached the bedroom window. There the rhythm broke. The path widened into a packed oval where the walker had stopped. Both feet side by side, toes pointed toward the glass. The snow was flat and deeper there than anywhere else, as if the thing had stood for a long time. I looked up at the window from outside and saw the curtains still drawn, the faint yellow lamp glow behind them. I could picture us in bed on the other side, asleep and warm, not knowing that something barefoot and impossible was standing below the sill, looking at where our heads would be. My partner asked whether I had opened the curtain in the night. I had not. Then we both remembered that, before sleeping, we had left a narrow gap between the curtains because we liked waking to the morning light. A gap just wide enough for someone standing in the snow to see the bed. That was when the memory of the brushing sound came back to me. Passing under the window. Fading. Returning. Around and around. We packed quickly. There was no dramatic argument. No speech about being brave. We knew the road was not truly safe yet, and we knew staying felt worse than risking the drive. While my partner loaded the car, I kept glancing at the ring around the house. By then the sun had begun to soften the top of the snow, but the path remained dark and hard, a circle that seemed older than the storm. I had the irrational feeling that if we waited until sunset, we would not be able to cross it. Before we left, I went back upstairs to close the bedroom curtains properly. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted the house not to look asleep. Maybe I wanted whatever came back not to see the bed empty. From that window I looked down at the place where the tracks had stopped. I saw the oval of packed snow. I saw the two bare prints facing the wall. And because I was above it now, I saw one more thing we had missed from the ground. On the windowsill outside, in the frost, there were 5 pale streaks where fingers had rested against the glass. We sold the place months later. In the listing photos, it looked harmless again, bright and rural and charming. There was no snow, no circle, no sign of what had spent a night walking around it. People asked why we were letting it go. We said it was too remote, too hard to maintain, too far from work. All of that was true enough. But the real reason was that houses remember the things that wait outside them. And I could not sleep there again knowing that in winter, when the world went white and quiet, Something might come back to make its patient circle, stop under our bedroom window, and look in to see who was sleeping in the warmth. There was one more thing we discovered only after we had already made the decision to leave. The power line to the house ran from a pole near the road, crossed the yard, and attached just above the upstairs window. Sometime in the night, snow had built up on the cable and sagged it close to the roofline. Where the line passed over the circle, the tracks went underneath without disturbing the fallen ice around it, as if the walker had ducked with careful familiarity. That detail made it feel less like a wandering stranger and more like someone studying the house in all its small arrangements. Months later, after the sale, the new owner called about a box we had forgotten in the cellar. He was friendly, full of plans, excited about the place. He asked casually whether we had ever had trouble with animals in winter, because the first snow had revealed a strange packed trail around the foundation. I told him we had seen deer sometimes, which was cowardly and useless. He laughed, and said deer do not walk in circles like monks around an old church. Then the line went quiet for a moment, and he asked whether the upstairs bedroom window had always been hard to open from the inside. I said I did not know, though I did. It had never been hard before that winter. Sometimes I think about the circle as a question. Not who are you, not may I come in, but are you still there? Around and around, the question asked with bare feet in snow until the house answered by remaining warm. Maybe it had circled other houses before ours. Maybe it had learned that every home has one room where the sleepers are easiest to find. That thought is why, on winter nights, I close bedroom curtains all the way, even in places where no one could possibly be outside. The wind has not settled yet. Keep your breathing slow. Here is the next one. The knock in the blizzard. I was alone at a remote cabin one winter when the storm of the season hit. A true whiteout blizzard, wind screaming, snow so thick you couldn't see your hand at the window, the temperature plunging to something that kills in minutes. I was warm, well-stocked, glad to be inside. No one could possibly be out in that. Nothing could survive it. The nearest other person was miles away. I was completely, safely alone. And then someone knocked on the door. 3 knocks, firm, over the howl of the wind. My blood went cold faster than the storm could have managed. I went to the door, and through it, over the wind, came a voice. A man's voice, frightened, desperate, half-frozen. Please, please, my car went off the road, I've been walking for hours, I'm freezing, please let me in, please, I'm going to die out here. Every instinct screamed at me to open the door. A man freezing to death on my doorstep. What kind of person leaves someone to die in a blizzard? My hand was on the lock. But something stopped me. Some animal part of me did the math the rest of me didn't want to. There was no road close enough for a car to have gone off it within hours of walking. Not in that terrain, not in that storm. No one could have walked for hours in that whiteout and still be standing, still be speaking clearly, still be knocking firmly. The cold would have taken them long before they reached me. The voice on the other side of the door was warm and steady in a way that nothing alive could be after hours in that storm. I did not open the door. I called back that I'd radio for help, that they should find shelter, and I backed away from the door. The voice kept on. For hours. All night. It pleaded, it wept, it begged, it used every word that should have broken my heart and opened my door. It told me it was dying. It told me it had children. It cried. And slowly, as the night wore on and I didn't open the door, it changed. The way these things in the stories always change, the way I'd somehow always known it would. The pleading drained away, and the voice went flat and patient and cold, colder than the storm, and it said, conversationally, "You're smarter than the last one." He opened the door. and then it was quiet. In the morning, when the storm cleared, there were no tracks outside my door. None. No footprints in the fresh snow, no sign anyone had stood there at all. Nothing had walked to my door through that snow. But something had stood outside it all night, in a storm that kills, knocking, and asking, very politely and very desperately, to be let in out of the cold. The cabin was not meant for comfort so much as survival. One room, a loft, a wood stove, a shelf of canned food, a radio that worked when the weather allowed it, and windows so small they seemed designed less to let light in than to keep the dark out. I had rented it for solitude, and for the first 2 days that was exactly what it gave me. I read. I split kindling. I walked the short trail to the ridge before the snow got heavy. Then the forecast changed, and the mountain disappeared. By late afternoon the storm had swallowed every landmark. The pines beyond the porch became gray shapes, then shadows, then nothing. The world outside the windows turned into a moving wall of white. I had seen blizzards before, but not like that. This one had a force to it, a personality almost. It leaned against the cabin. It pushed at the door. It made the walls give little wooden sighs, as if the cold outside had hands and was testing the seams. I made sensible choices. I brought an extra wood before visibility vanished. I filled a kettle and 2 pots in case the pipes froze. I checked the flue. I put my boots near the stove and my coat on the chair. The simple task steadied me. Every time the wind screamed hard enough to make the roof pop, I reminded myself that the cabin had stood through worse winters than this. I was not in danger unless I did something stupid. Staying inside was the rule. Do not panic. Do not wander. Do not open the door. The first knock came while I was eating soup from the pot because I did not feel like washing a bowl. 3 firm strikes. Not the random slam of wind. Not a branch. A human rhythm. I froze with the spoon halfway to my mouth. The stove ticked. The wind roared. For a second I wondered if the sound had been inside my head, an accident of loneliness and weather. Then it came again. 3 knocks. Polite. Controlled. Waiting. I went to the door because of course I did. Even now, after everything, I cannot pretend I ignored it from the start. A knock makes a demand deeper than reason. Someone knocks, and some old social machinery inside you answers before fear can stop it. I crossed the room quietly, as though whoever stood outside might not know I was there. That was absurd. The cabin was lit. Smoke was rising from the chimney. In that endless white, I must have looked like a lantern. The voice began before I touched the lock. It was muffled by the door and the storm, but clear enough to understand. A man, desperate and shivering, telling me his car had left the road, telling me he had walked for hours, telling me he could not feel his hands. The words came in bursts, shaped like panic. Please, please let me in. I am freezing. I am going to die. There are phrases that do not allow you to remain neutral. They reach through the door and grab the decent part of you by the throat. I almost opened it. My fingers were on the bolt. I remember the exact cold of the metal, colder than the room should have allowed. Then I looked down, not through a window, because there was no window in the door, but at the bottom crack where snow had blown under the threshold in a thin white line. If someone had been standing on the porch, the wind should have pushed loose snow around his boots. I should have heard weight on the boards. Creaking. Shifting. Something. But underneath the crying voice, there was no body sound at all. That was what saved me, I think. Not courage. Not intelligence. A small absence. The cabin porch always groaned when I stepped on it, even gently. Whoever was outside was making no sound except the sound it wanted me to hear. No stomp of frozen feet. No scrape of hand against wood. No ragged breath except the breath inside the voice. It was as though the storm had learned to speak like a man and had placed the words at the door without needing a man to carry them. I backed away. The voice heard the movement somehow. It became more frantic. It called me sir, then friend, then brother. It said it could see the light under the door. It said it knew I was there. It said I would have to live with what I had done if I left him outside. That one struck hard, because it was true in the way lies often borrow truth. If he had been real, I would have been guilty. If he had been real, my caution would have killed him. The thing outside understood that. It did not attack the door. It attacked my conscience. I tried the radio. Static. I tried my phone even though I knew there was no service. Nothing. I shouted through the door that help was coming, that he should get into the woods, dig a shelter, conserve heat. The voice sobbed harder. It said it could not move. It said it was sitting right against the door. It said if I opened it even a crack, it could crawl inside. That image almost broke me, a half-frozen man on his knees, forehead against the wood, salvation inches away. I took one step forward before stopping again. Hours are strange in a storm. Without the windows giving you anything but white, time becomes the stove, the kettle, the level of wood in the basket, the changing tone of the wind. The voice stayed with me through all of it. Sometimes it pleaded. Sometimes it went quiet long enough that I hoped it had left, or died, or never been there. Then it would knock again, softer, weaker, and whisper that it was so cold. Once it used my name. I had not told it my name. It said it gently, the way someone might say it from the foot of a hospital bed. That was when I moved the chair in front of the door. Near 3 in the morning, the performance began to slip. The voice repeated a sentence it had already said, word for word, with the same crack in the same place. Then it changed its story. The car had gone off the road to the east. Later, it had gone off near the bridge, which was west. It had children. Then it had a wife but no children. Then it had a little girl waiting at home, and it described her red mittens in such perfect detail that I had to cover my ears. It was searching for the key to me, trying doors inside my mind the way it could not try the real one. The last hour before dawn was the worst because the voice stopped pretending to weaken. It became calm, almost conversational. It thanked me for listening. It said many people do not listen so long. It said the last man had opened the door quickly, which was generous of him, although generosity had not helped him. Then it laughed once, not loudly, not like a monster in a story, but with the dry amusement of someone remembering a small private joke. When the light finally changed at the windows, the voice was gone. I waited another hour before moving the chair. Then another before opening the inner latch. The storm had passed into a hard blue morning. Snow buried the porch nearly to the top step. The surface was smooth. Perfect. No footprints. No disturbed drift. No place where a freezing man had knelt. The door itself was rimed with frost, but the wood where a fist should have struck was clean and dry. I stood there with the cold pouring into the cabin and understood that nothing had approached through the snow. The knocking had not traveled to me. It had simply arrived. Rescue came the next day when the road crew cleared the track. I told them nothing. What would I have said? That someone impossible had begged for shelter? That the storm had borrowed a human voice? They would have blamed isolation, and maybe they would have been kind about it. I let them believe I was shaken by the weather. I packed my things and left with the stove still warm. Since then, I have learned something about doors. A door is not only wood and metal. It is an agreement. Inside and outside. Warmth and cold. Me and not me. Most nights you never think about it. But in deep winter during a whiteout, when the world beyond the walls has no shape, the door becomes the most important thing you own. And if something knocks from the side where no person can be, you do not owe it kindness. You owe the living a locked door. You owe yourself the strength to let the voice beg until morning. I used to believe the danger in stories like this was curiosity. Do not open the mysterious box. Do not follow the strange light. Do not read the name aloud. But that night taught me that the most dangerous door is opened by compassion. Whatever stood outside did not ask me to be foolish. It asked me to be good. It arranged the situation so that survival felt like cruelty. That is a more precise evil than hunger or rage. Years later, I looked up missing persons reports from that region, trying to learn about the last one it mentioned, the person who opened the door. There had been a man found in an old cabin after a blizzard 12 years before my stay. The report said exposure, though he had been indoors. It said the door was open when rescuers arrived, snow drifted all the way to the stove. It said there were no signs of struggle. It said his face showed severe frost damage inconsistent with the temperature inside. Reports have polite ways of saying the facts do not know how to stand together. I stopped reading after that. Some confirmations do not comfort you. They only prove the lock mattered. I have been asked what I would do if it happened again, and I never know how to answer honestly. I want to say I would refuse faster, with more certainty. But I remember the voice. I remember how human it sounded when it said please. Evil that snarls is easy to resist. Evil that shivers on your porch and calls you kind is another matter. So my true answer is this. I would put my back against the door, cover my ears, and pray dawn came before my mercy weakened. You are doing fine. Let your eyes rest. The next tape is already playing. The cabin radio. I got snowed in at a backcountry cabin during a research trip. Just me, isolated, the storm closing the only road for what would clearly be days. It was fine. I was equipped for it. I had supplies, heat, and a two-way radio to stay in contact with my base station down in the valley, checking in morning and night. The radio was my one link to the world. On the second night of the storm, alone, I keyed it on for my evening check-in. And before I could speak, a voice came through. It wasn't my base station. It was a calm voice, unhurried, and it was describing the cabin. My cabin. Single-room structure, it said. Timber, wood stove burning, one occupant, seated at the table near the radio. It was describing me. Where I was, what I was doing, the exact scene inside the cabin, in real time, as though it could see me. But no one could see me. I was alone, miles from anyone, sealed in by the storm. I sat frozen, and the voice continued its calm description. Occupant has stopped moving. Occupant is listening now. Good. I didn't answer it. I tried to raise my base station on the proper channel. The voice answered instead, on every channel, calm and patient, always describing the cabin and me within it, narrating my position. Occupant has moved to the window. Occupant is looking out at the snow. Occupant will not see anything. Not yet. I was at the window when it said it. I had not told it that. I jerked the curtains shut. Occupant has closed the curtains, the voice observed mildly. That's all right. It doesn't help, but it's all right. It knew everything I did, the instant I did it, a calm running commentary on my every move, from somewhere out in the storm, on a radio that should only have reached the valley. I turned the radio off. In the dead silence of the snowbound cabin, that was almost worse. Cut off now, truly alone, with no way to call for the help I now badly wanted. I did not sleep. I sat up all night with the wood stove roaring and every light on, and near dawn, exhausted, I turned the radio back on, just to hear a human voice, praying for my base station. The calm voice was waiting. It said, "Occupant, turn the radio back on." They always do. It gets lonely, doesn't it, being described and never spoken to? Would you like me to come a little closer, so you don't have to be alone? The road cleared 2 days later. I left and never went back to fieldwork in winter. And I have never since been able to listen to a radio late at night, in a quiet house, without waiting for a calm voice to begin, gently, to describe exactly what I'm doing. I had been warned about isolation, but always in practical terms. Check the batteries. Keep dry socks. Mark the trail before fresh snow covers it. Do not rely on confidence once the weather turns. No one told me that isolation has a sound. In that cabin, once the storm settled over the valley, the sound was not silence exactly. It was the stove breathing, the roof creaking, and the radio giving off a faint electrical smell from the corner of the table, as if it were the only awake thing in the room. The cabin was a research shelter used by different field teams through the year. In summer it probably felt temporary, a place for maps and muddy boots and coffee made too strong. In winter, sealed in snow, it felt older than the work we did there. The walls were darkened by years of stove smoke. Names had been carved into the underside of the table. Someone had nailed a horseshoe above the door, either as a joke or not. I remember noticing it on the second day, and wondering why a scientific station had a charm against bad luck. My schedule was simple. Morning check-in, weather readings, notes, fuel count, evening check-in. The voice at base was usually Marin, who had the steady boredom of someone warm in an office far below. She would ask for my numbers, remind me not to push myself, and sign off with a joke about the coffee supply. Those brief conversations mattered more than I admitted. They proved the world still existed beyond the windows. They gave the day 2 posts to tie itself to. On the second evening the storm thickened so much that the windows went opaque. Snow had stuck to the outside glass and hard plates, and the room was lit mostly by lantern and stove glow. I remember feeling proud of how calm I was. The road was closed, yes. The wind was bad, yes. But I had done everything correctly. I set my notebook beside the radio, tuned to the scheduled channel, and reached for the transmitter. That was when the speaker clicked. The voice was already there, mid-sentence, as though I had joined a broadcast that had been running for some time. It described the cabin first with the dry precision of a report. Structure, timber, 1 room. Stove active. 1 occupant. No immediate exterior movement. I thought at first I had picked up another team, maybe search and rescue, maybe someone monitoring cabins during the storm. Then it said, occupant seated at table with left hand near transmitter, and my left hand jerked away from the radio as if burned. There are fears that arrive all at once, and fears that bloom slowly. This was the second kind. I did not scream. I did not run. I stared at the radio and waited for the explanation to appear. It did not. The voice continued, calm and genderless and intimate. Occupant has withdrawn hand. Occupant is watching the radio. Breathing increased. Pulse likely elevated. It spoke like someone reading measurements from instruments, except the instrument was me. I turned the dial. Static, then the same voice. Another frequency. Same voice. Emergency channel. Same voice, now with a faint note of approval. Occupant is attempting alternate channels. Occupant believes this may restore normal contact. That was the moment I understood that it was not merely observing me. It understood what I believed. It knew not only where I stood, but why I moved. I tried to outsmart it in small childish ways. I sat still without warning. It said occupant has become still. I raised my right hand instead of my left. It said right hand raised. I mouthed words without speaking. It said nothing about them, which somehow frightened me more. Its knowledge was not unlimited then, or it chose to pretend it was not. I wondered where it was looking from. A hidden camera? A person outside the window? A drone in the storm? Each explanation collapsed under the weight of the weather, the remoteness, the impossibility of power and signal. When it told me to look at the window, I did not want to. The sentence was mild. Occupant is considering the north window. Occupant should not expect to see anything yet. Yet. That one word made the room shrink around me. I stood because staying seated felt worse. The floorboards complained under my boots. I crossed to the window and wiped a circle in the condensation with my sleeve. Beyond the glass was snow pressed flat against darkness. Nothing moved. Nothing could have moved in that wind. And from the radio behind me, the voice said, "Occupant is looking directly outward. Visibility remains limited. This is acceptable." I shut the curtains with both hands. The voice commented on that too. It did not mock me. It never mocked me, which is one reason I still hate remembering it. Mockery would have made it smaller. Cruelty would have given it a shape. Instead, it observed me with a patience that felt almost professional. I was not a victim to it. I was a subject. Something to be recorded through the long night. I switched the radio off. The sudden silence was enormous. For a few minutes I felt relief. Then the relief curdled. The radio had been terrible because it told me I was seen. Without it, I had no proof that I was no longer being seen. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. The curtains looked too thin. The horseshoe above the door looked ridiculous and desperate. I began to understand why people talk to themselves in remote places. A voice, even your own, pushes back against the pressure of being watched. I lasted maybe 40 minutes before turning it on again. I told myself I needed to try bass. I told myself conditions might have shifted. The truth is the voice had been right. It gets lonely, being described and never spoken to. When the speaker clicked alive, there was no static. No search. It was waiting on the exact frequency. Occupant has returned. The sentence was soft, almost pleased. Then it said something that made my stomach drop. Occupant has learned the room is worse without narration. After that, I stopped pretending I was in control. I sat by the stove with the radio on the table and listened while it described me through the night. Sometimes it reported ordinary things. Occupant adds wood. Occupant drinks water. Occupant checks door latch. Sometimes it predicted what I would do seconds before I did it, and I would fight the urge, only to do it anyway because the act of resisting had been included in the prediction. Once it said occupant is remembering the map in the upper drawer. I had not thought of that map in hours, but the moment it said it, there it was in my mind, folded under pencils, showing the valley roads now buried under snow. Around dawn, the voice changed from observation to invitation. It said the storm had reduced distance. It said barriers were mostly agreements. It said it could continue from closer if I wished. I did not answer. It said many occupants eventually answer. The word occupants told me I was not the first. That the cabin, or the storm, or the radio itself had hosted this before. People alone in winter, needing contact badly enough to accept the wrong kind. When bass finally broke through the next morning, Marin's voice sounded thin and miraculous. She said they had tried to reach me twice. She said the signal had been strange. She asked whether I was all right. I almost told her everything. Instead, I said the storm had made reception bad, which was not a lie in any useful way. She told me the road might clear in 2 days. I said I understood. Behind her voice, very faintly, beneath the static, I thought I heard another voice begin to say, "Occupant is lying." Then the signal snapped clean again. I left as soon as the track was passable. I turned in my field notes, resigned from winter assignments, and avoided questions. The radio stayed in the cabin. I did not touch it on the way out. But as I closed the door, the speaker clicked once from inside, though I had removed the battery. I heard one last sentence through the wood, too muffled to be certain, but I know what it sounded like. Occupant departing. Occupant will continue to listen for us. I do. That is the worst part. Radios in taxis, weather alerts in stores, static between stations, baby monitors in houses I visit. Any small speaker hissing in the dark can put me back at that table. I wait for the calm voice to begin. Single room. 1 occupant. Seated near the light. Listening now. Good. The worst legacy of that cabin was not fear of radios. It was the feeling of being narratable. For a long time after, I caught myself imagining sentences over my own life. Subject enters kitchen. Subject checks window. Subject lies awake at 2:17 a.m. listening for static. Trauma can become a second voice if you let it. Mine had the same calm tone as the broadcast, and I hated how easily my mind learned to imitate it. I eventually told the technician about the incident, leaving out the impossible parts, asking whether a radio could receive reflections from its own transmission or some automated signal loop. He explained skip, interference, cross-channel bleed, all the strange but ordinary ways voices travel. Then he asked, almost as an afterthought, whether the voice ever responded to movement when the microphone was not keyed. I said yes. He did not offer another explanation. He only said that in old rescue lore, people sometimes heard watchers in storms, voices that counted them, located them, kept them company until they stepped outside. Then he smiled like he wished he had not said it. There was one object I took from the cabin without meaning to, a habit of unplugging things before sleep. Radios, speakers, televisions, anything that can become a mouth in the dark. It has not cured the fear. The silence after unplugging has its own shape now. Still, I prefer quiet objects. A dead radio is only plastic and wire. A live one is a question waiting for the wrong storm to answer. The snow is still falling softly in the dark. You do not need to look outside for this one. The extra set of footprints. 2 of us went winter hiking in the mountains. Myself and my closest friend, both experienced, both careful, prepared for the cold and the snow. It was a clear, beautiful, bitterly cold day, the kind that makes winter hiking worth the risk, the snow pristine and deep and untouched, stretching unbroken in every direction. We were the only people for miles. The only living things moving in all that white. Just the 2 of us, and the crunch of our boots, and our 2 sets of tracks stretching out behind us in the fresh snow. It was my friend who noticed it first, glancing back the way we'd come. 3 sets of tracks. 2 of us, but 3 sets of footprints trailing behind us in the snow. We stopped. We counted. 2 hikers. 3 trails of prints, side by side, following us, in untouched wilderness where no one else had walked. We told ourselves we'd somehow doubled back, crossed our own path, that one set was older. But they were fresh, all three parallel, keeping pace. Two sets that were ours, and a third, walking alongside us, in the deep snow, made by something we could not see. We didn't speak about it much. There's not much to say, standing in the frozen silence of the mountains, looking at the footprints of an invisible third hiker walking beside you. We just turned and started back, fast, toward the trailhead in the car, trying not to look at the snow beside us, trying not to think about who was matching our pace, step for step, in prints we could see but a body we couldn't. And as we walked, I made the mistake of watching the snow beside me, and I saw them form. The third set of prints, appearing one by one in the untouched snow right next to me, an arm's length away, pressing down out of nothing, keeping easy pace with my own frightened steps. Something was walking beside me. I could have reached out and touched it. I did not reach out. We made it back. The third set of prints followed us all the way to the trailhead, to the very edge of the plowed parking lot, and stopped there, at the boundary of the wild snow, as we stumbled onto the cleared pavement and into the car. We drove home shaking, and we never winter hiked again, not together, not apart. But my friend called me, years later, out of the blue, his voice strange. He'd gone for a walk that morning, he said, after a fresh snow, in his own suburban neighborhood, far from any mountain. And there, in the new snow on the quiet sidewalk, keeping pace beside his own footprints, was a third set of tracks. It had followed one of us home. It had just taken its time. And I have been afraid, every snowfall since, to look too closely at the prints beside my own. We chose that route because it was familiar. That sounds foolish now, but familiarity is how people survive mountains. We knew the grade, the tree line, the place where the trail crossed the shallow ravine and bent toward the lookout. We had hiked it in autumn with red leaves underfoot, and in spring with meltwater flashing over rocks. In winter it was harder, but not reckless. The forecast was clear. The snow was fresh. We carried the right gear. We were not tourists wandering into a postcard. We respected the cold. The morning was so bright it seemed impossible that anything bad could happen. Sun on snow can make the world look honest. Every ridge was sharp, every pine branch outlined in white, every breath visible and immediate. My friend was in front at first, breaking trail because he had longer legs and liked to pretend that mattered. I followed in his steps when the drifts got deep, and when the trail widened, we walked side by side, laughing at the squeak of the powder under our boots. There is a pleasure in seeing your own tracks behind you in untouched snow. Proof of passage. A clean line showing where you have been. In summer the woods close behind you and leave no sign. In winter the world keeps a record. That day the record was supposed to show 2 people going up and 2 people coming down. Nothing more mysterious than that. We reached the lookout just before noon. The valley below was white and silent, smoke rising from a few distant houses like threads. We drank coffee from a thermos and ate sandwiches that had gone hard at the edges from the cold. I remember my friend taking a picture of our shadows stretched long across the snow. 2 shadows. 2 backpacks. 2 bright, ridiculous hats. When we started down, we were tired but happy, the kind of tired that feels earned. The third trail appeared in a wide open section where wind had brushed the surface smooth. My friend stopped so suddenly I nearly walked into him. He was looking back, not ahead. At first I thought he had dropped something. Then he raised one gloved hand and pointed. I turned, and there they were. 3 lines of prints descending from the lookout. Ours, and another set just to the right, as regular and fresh as if a third hiker had walked with us the whole way. The mind tries to protect itself with stupid explanations. Animal tracks. Snow falling from branches. Our own tracks doubled by drifting. But these were boot prints, or close enough to boot prints that pretending otherwise felt childish. They were not identical to ours. Narrower. Deeper at the toe. The stride was wrong too, slightly too long, as if whoever made them did not have to push through the snow in the same way. They kept beside us with a companion's spacing, neither following nor leading. We argued quietly, because loud voices felt inappropriate. My friend said someone must have come up behind us and passed while we were at the lookout. I pointed out there were no tracks approaching from behind except ours and the third. He said maybe a skier? There were no ski marks. I said maybe we had crossed an old trail that the wind had half covered. But the prints began exactly where ours became visible and continued exactly with them. The snow was telling a story with 3 characters, and only 2 of them were willing to be seen. We turned back toward the car. The mood changed instantly. The same woods that had felt clean now felt staged. Every dark gap between trees seemed to hold a watcher. We walked faster than was safe, slipping on packed patches under the powder. The third prince remained beside us. When the trail narrowed, ours overlapped because one of us had to go first. The third set did not overlap. It appeared in places where there was no room to walk, along the slope edge, over buried rocks, through brush that did not bend. I made myself watch the snow beside me because not watching was worse. That is how I saw the prints form. One moment the surface was smooth. The next, a hollow press down, heel then sole then toe, with a little puff of powder at the edges. Then another. Then another. They kept pace with my steps. There was no sound from them. No crunch. No breath. No shadow. Just the snow accepting weight from something the air refused to show. My friend whispered my name without turning his head. He had seen it too. After that we stopped speaking. Our fear became practical and wordless. Keep moving. Do not run unless it runs. Do not touch the empty space. Do not acknowledge it more than we already had. The mountains are full of rules nobody teaches you until too late, and we were inventing ours as we went. At one point I stumbled. My right knee went into the snow and pain shot up my leg. Before my friend could help me, a print appeared beside my fallen hand. Not ahead. Not behind. Beside it. A deep, narrow footprint pressing into the powder inches from my glove. I felt cold move through my sleeve, not from the snow, but from the nearness of whatever stood there. I had the unbearable sense that it had stopped politely, waiting for me to rise, like a patient companion on a walk. I did rise. My friend hauled me up so hard my shoulder hurt for days. The third prince resumed as soon as I took my next step. That detail has stayed with me. It did not chase. It did not herd. It waited when we waited, walked when we walked, matched us with the calm insistence of something that believed it belonged in our company. The parking lot appeared between the trees like a rescue. The plowed pavement was dark and wet where the sun had reached it. We stumbled out of the snow and onto the cleared ground. The third track stopped at the edge. They did not cross the boundary. For one wild second I thought we had escaped because pavement could not hold the print. Then, in the slush at the edge of the lot, one final impression appeared, toe just touching asphalt. A hesitation. A decision postponed. We drove home without music. We did not discuss whether to report anything, because what report could include an invisible hiker? For months we avoided each other without admitting it. We were not angry. We were witnesses, and witnesses can make each other too real. If I saw him, I saw the mountain. If he saw me, he saw the third path. Years later, his call came during the first snow of the season. I knew before he said anything that something was wrong. His voice had the thin, careful sound people use around hospital beds and bad news. He told me he had taken a walk in his neighborhood. A harmless walk past houses with Christmas lights and parked cars half covered in powder. He had looked back because of habit, because people who have seen wrong tracks always look back. Beside his prints was a second set. Not 3 this time. Just his and the other. It had chosen him, or found him, or remembered the rhythm of his stride. I asked what he did. He said he went home and salted the driveway until the prints melted. He laughed when he said it, and then he cried. We talked for a long time about ordinary things because neither of us wanted to say the obvious. Mountains are not always places. Sometimes the thing that meets you in the wilderness follows the idea of you back into the world. It waits for snow because snow lets it speak. Now, whenever snow falls, I do not look behind me right away. I give myself a few steps of mercy. Then I look, because not knowing is worse. So far, most winters, there has only been one set of tracks. Mine. But fresh snow keeps records, and I have learned that the world can include a companion you cannot see, walking at your shoulder, patient through years, waiting for the right white morning to leave its mark beside yours again. My friend and I made one pact after his neighborhood call. If the tracks appeared again, neither of us would follow them backward. That was the temptation we both understood without saying. A second trail beside your own invites a question: where did it begin? But following a thing like that to its beginning feels too much like accepting an introduction. Some mysteries are only safe if you refuse to trace them home. He moved south 2 years later, to a place where snow was rare enough to be news. He sent me a photo one January after an unexpected storm dusted his street. It showed his front walk, a palm tree, a child's bicycle, and one clean line of prints leading from his door to the mailbox. Only his. No companion. The message underneath said maybe it lost interest. I wanted to believe that. But near the edge of the photo, in a patch of powder beneath the hedge, there was a single narrow footprint angled toward the house, as if something had stood off to the side where he would not think to look. The mountains taught me that absence can have weight. Before that day, invisible meant unreal to me. Afterward, I understood that the world is full of things whose bodies are less important than their effects. A step in snow. A pause beside your hand. A line that follows you home years later. You do not need to see the hiker to know whether it is near. Fresh snow will tell you, if you are brave enough to look behind. Breathe slowly. The storm has you wrapped in sound. Here is the next. The frozen lake crossing. In the far north where I grew up, the lakes freeze so thick in winter that crossing them on foot is faster than going around. Everyone does it. It's safe, when you know the ice, and I knew the ice. One clear, cold winter night I was crossing our big lake on foot to get home, the moon bright on the snow-dusted ice, the world silent and beautiful and frozen solid beneath me. The ice was a foot thick, maybe more. Safe as a road. And as I walked, I happened to look down through a wind-cleared patch of clear black ice, into the dark water below. And something was looking back up. A face. Pale, just beneath the ice, looking up at me through the clear black panel of it. My heart stopped. Someone trapped, drowned, frozen under. But no. The face wasn't trapped. It was moving. As I stood frozen in horror, staring down at it, the face below the ice began to move, to keep pace, to follow as I started, shakily, to walk on. It swam along beneath the ice, just under the surface, under my feet, looking up at me, matching my pace across the frozen lake, a pale face and a paler shape gliding through the black water beneath the foot of solid ice that was all that lay between us. I kept walking. What else could I do? I was in the middle of the lake, the shore still far off, and the only way home was forward, across the ice, above the thing that swam beneath it watching me. So I walked, and it followed, gliding under the ice, never falling behind, its pale face turned up toward me the whole way. And as I walked, I began to hear it, a faint sound, coming up through the ice, through the foot of frozen lake between us. It was tapping. Knuckles, or something like them, tapping on the underside of the ice as it swam along beneath me, keeping pace, tapping up at the soles of my boots, gently, patiently, the way you tap on a window to get someone's attention. Testing the ice. Or asking me to come down. Or simply letting me know, with every tap, exactly how thin the only thing between us really was. I made it to shore. The face followed me to the very edge, to where the ice met the bank, and as I scrambled up onto solid frozen ground, the tapping stopped, and the pale shape sank back down, slowly, into the black water under the ice, and was gone. I have never crossed the frozen lake on foot again, though I grew up doing it, though everyone in that country does it. Because I know now what the old-timers meant when they said, always, to stick to the snow-covered ice and never walk on the clear black patches. It isn't because the clear ice is thinner. It's because the clear ice is a window. And the things that live in the black water under the winter ice spend the whole long frozen season looking up through those windows, watching for footsteps, hoping someone will walk across the glass and look down and meet their eyes, and tap back. In the north, winter changes geography. Roads matter less once the lakes freeze. A lake that separated two towns in July becomes a shortcut in January. Children learn early how to read ice by color and sound, how to avoid pressure ridges, how to listen for the deep cannon boom that means the lake is shifting but not necessarily breaking. Outsiders hear the ice sing and panic. Locals hear it and keep walking. I was a local. That confidence nearly ruined me. The night I crossed, the cold was clean and sharp. No storm, no falling snow, no wind to confuse the senses. The moon was bright enough that I did not need a flashlight. It turned the lake into a wide dull mirror, dusted here and there with powder that blew in low ripples over the surface. The village lights behind me were small and warm. The lights ahead, on my side of the lake, looked closer than they were. I remember thinking that the world was beautiful in a way that made loneliness feel noble. The ice underfoot was thick. That is important. I have told this story to people who want to make it about danger, about a foolish crossing, about thin ice and panic. It was not that. The ice was solid enough for trucks in daylight. I was not walking over a trap. I was walking over a locked door. There is a difference, and it is a terrible one. Halfway across, I reached a patch where the wind had polished the ice clear. Most people dislike those places because they reveal the depth beneath. Snow-covered ice feels like ground. Clear ice reminds you it is only a surface. Under my boots, black water opened like sky. I saw bubbles suspended below, white cracks branching deep, and faint movement where the moonlight reached down and failed. I slowed, partly from caution and partly because the clear ice was beautiful. Then the face rose into view. It did not rush up. That would have been easier somehow, a flash of panic, a thing mistaken for a fish or a branch. It approached slowly from below, becoming pale in the darkness one feature at a time. Forehead. Cheekbones. Dark hollows where eyes should have reflected moonlight but did not. It stopped just beneath the underside of the ice and turned upward toward me. I had the insane thought that it had been waiting under that exact clear patch for someone to step onto it. My first reaction was human. Someone was trapped. Someone had fallen through elsewhere and drifted under. I dropped to one knee before reason caught up. A drowned face does not track your movement with calm attention. A body under ice does not hold itself against the current and wait. When I shifted left, the face shifted. When I stood, it tilted up, following. Its hair, if that is what it was, floated around it in slow pale strands. I began walking again because standing still felt like agreeing to something. The thing beneath the ice moved with me. It did not swim like an animal. It glided, just under the surface, its face always turned upward. Sometimes the ice was frosted, and I could see only a pale blur below. Then another clear patch would come and there it would be, perfectly aligned beneath me, eyes lifted to my boots. I tried stepping faster. It matched me. I slowed without meaning to. It slowed too. The tapping began after perhaps 50 yards. At first I thought it was the ice itself, making those familiar winter sounds. But this was small. Deliberate. A light repeated contact from below. Tap. 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 Not breaking force. Not even an attempt. More like a greeting. More like a finger against glass. It came from directly under me, then slightly behind, then under me again, following the rhythm of my steps with a second rhythm of its own. I wanted to run, but running on ice is a good way to fall, and falling would put my hands and face against the surface. That idea was unbearable. So I walked with careful speed, every muscle rigid, staring toward shore and trying not to look down. The tapping continued. At times it came in little patterns, 3 quick taps, a pause, 2 slower ones. It felt almost like language, or like a child amusing itself against the window. The worst part was when it found the cracks. The ice had long white fracture lines running through it, old and sealed and harmless. As I crossed one, the pale shape beneath pressed a hand up against the underside. I saw long fingers spread below the crack, lining themselves with it, as though measuring where the door might someday open. The tapping became a soft scraping. Nails, or something that served as nails, dragged beneath my path. I tasted metal in my mouth from clenching my teeth. There is a superstition in my hometown that you do not speak on clear ice at night. People treat it as an old joke. The idea is that sound goes down better than it comes up, that the lake hears you, that the things beneath learn your voice. I had laughed at that as a teenager. On that crossing, I understood why the rule existed. My own breath sounded too loud. I was afraid even to whisper a prayer. I did not want the face below to know my voice as well as it knew my footsteps. Near shore, the ice changed color, clouding with trapped snow and reeds. The tapping grew faster. Not frantic exactly, but eager. The pale shape rose closer until its face distorted against the underside, flattened by the ice. I could see the mouth then. It was closed, but the expression suggested listening. I had the awful sense that if I stopped, if I leaned down, if I put my ear to the surface, I would hear it speaking from the black water in a voice made soft by cold. I reached the bank and climbed onto frozen ground with no dignity at all, crawling the last few feet through crusted snow and dead grass. Behind me, the tapping stopped at once. The silence after it was worse than the sound. I turned despite myself. Through a final strip of clear ice near the reeds, the face looked up at me. Then it moved backward, sinking slowly, not disappointed, not angry, simply withdrawing to wait beneath the winter road everyone else still trusted. For weeks afterward, I dreamed of walking over glass floors. I dreamed of faces under kitchen tiles, under sidewalks, under the skin of frozen puddles. I told one old man in the village because he had known me since I was a child and had the courtesy not to laugh. He only nodded and asked whether I had tapped back. I said no. He said good. Then he told me that some things under the lakes cannot break ice from below, not in the hard months. They need invitation. Attention is one kind. Touch is another. A return knock is worst of all. Spring came. The lake opened. Boats crossed. Children swam by July. Everyone forgot the winter road because that is how people survive in cold places. They let each season erase the last. I did not forget. I can stand beside that lake in summer and still feel the foot of ice that once separated me from the thing below. Water looks honest when it moves in sunlight, but I know what waits when it goes black and hard and quiet. I have never crossed a frozen lake again. People tease me for it. They call me cautious, city soft, superstitious. Let them. I will walk miles around before I put my boots on clear ice after dark. Because clear ice is not ground. It is a window. And winter does not empty the lakes. It seals them, preserving everything beneath, giving the dark water months to look upward and learn the shape of those who pass overhead. After the old man warned me never to tap back, he told me another rule I had forgotten from childhood. If you hear your name under the ice, keep walking. I laughed because I thought he was speaking metaphorically, but his face did not change. He said names travel downward through families, through old drownings, through the stories people tell by stoves when they think children are asleep. The things below do not always know who is walking. Sometimes they try names until one pair of feet stops. The following winter, I was in town during the first hard freeze. From the shore I watched people cross the lake with sleds and dogs and ordinary confidence. Halfway out, one child stopped over a clear patch and bent down to look. His mother shouted for him to keep moving. Her voice carried across the ice, sharp with a fear that sounded older than concern. The boy straightened and ran to catch up. For a moment, in the black square he had looked through, I saw a pale blur turn beneath the surface and follow his shadow. It did not follow far. It did not need to. Winter had only just begun. I have also learned to distrust beautiful ice. Clouded ice hides the water and lets you pretend the lake is asleep. Clear ice is honest in the cruelest way. It shows you depth without giving you safety. It lets the moon go down and the dark look up. People stop to admire that transparency. They take photographs of it. I cannot. To me, clear ice is a pane in a house I do not own, and I know something lives on the other side. Almost there. Stay soft. Here is the next one. The snow plow driver. I drove a snow plow for the county for 15 winters. The night shift, mostly, clearing the rural roads through the small hours so people could get to work in the morning. It's lonely, hypnotic work, the headlights, the falling snow, the endless white road unspooling ahead of you, the warm cab and the cold dark world outside. You see strange things on those empty roads at night, in the snow. Most of them are tricks of the light and the exhaustion. But one of them, I'm certain, was not. There was a stretch of rural road, out past the last farms, where I'd see a figure standing. Always the same spot, a bend, with deep woods on one side, a long way from any house. A person, standing at the edge of the road, in the falling snow, facing the road, watching the plow come. The first time, I slowed, worried, someone stranded, in danger, out in the cold. But as my headlights swept over the spot, there was no one there. Empty roadside, untouched snow. I drove on, unsettled, and chalked it up to tired eyes. But it kept happening. Every night I plowed that road, At that bend, the figure would be standing there in the snow as I approached, and would be gone the instant my lights reached it. I plowed that road hundreds of times over the years, and hundreds of times the figure was there, waiting at the bend, vanishing in the headlights. I learned to expect it, even to nod to it, the way you'd nod to a familiar landmark. It never came closer, never moved. Just stood at the edge of the woods in the falling snow, watching the plow, every winter night, gone before the light could show its face. I asked an old-timer at the depot about it once, half joking. He didn't laugh. He told me a plow driver had died on that bend decades back, gone off the road in a whiteout, into the deep woods, not found until the thaw. He's still working his route, the old-timer said. Still watching for the plow to come through. Just wave. He likes to know the road's still being cleared. So I waved. After that, every night, as I passed the bend, lifted a hand to the figure in the snow who vanished in my lights. And it felt right, somehow, two night shift plowmen acknowledging each other across the years, both of us out in the cold dark keeping the roads clear. I retired from plowing a while back, but I drove that road one last night, on my final shift, to say goodbye to my route. And at the bend, the figure was there, as always, in the falling snow. But this time, as my lights swept over it, just before it vanished, it lifted its hand. It waved back. After all those years, on my last night, the dead plow driver waved back, and I understood it was saying goodbye to one night shift man to another, and I drove home with tears freezing on my face, and I have never been so unafraid of anything so impossible in all my life. People think plowing is driving, but it is more like keeping a promise. The road disappears, and you bring it back. Again and again, through wind, darkness, and drifts that reform behind you as if the storm resents the correction. On the night shift, you learn the county by feel. The curve before the old Miller farm. The dip that always ices first. The mailbox that leans too close. The places where deer step out. The places where no one should be standing. My truck was older than some of the deputies who waved at me from intersections. Its heater rattled. The radio only worked when it felt generous. The plow blade through snow in a white wave to the shoulder, and the amber light on the roof painted everything in slow pulses. There is a trance to it. After midnight the world narrows to headlights and reflective signs. Your hands know the wheel. Your body knows when to lift the blade before your mind names the bridge. The bend where I first saw the figure was on County Road 6, out beyond the farms, where the woods pressed close on one side and the ditch dropped steep on the other. In daylight it was nothing. At night in snow, it had a way of appearing suddenly, the trees leaning over it like listeners. I always slowed there because drifting snow made the edge uncertain. That caution is why I noticed the person standing just beyond the shoulder. At first I swore aloud and hit the brakes. A person on a rural road during a snowstorm is an emergency until proved otherwise. The figure stood upright at the edge of the woods, facing the lane, dark against the white. No flashlight. No reflective clothing. No frantic waving. Just standing. I radioed dispatch that I might have a pedestrian in distress, then eased the truck forward. My headlights washed over the spot, and the figure was gone. There were no tracks. That bothered me more than the disappearance. A person can duck behind trees. A tired driver can mistake a signpost for a man. But snow remembers. The shoulder was smooth except for the powder thrown by my blade. No footprints led in from the woods or out toward the ditch. Dispatch asked me to repeat. I said never mind, likely a shadow. They accepted that because night crews accept many things they do not have time to examine. The figure returned the next time it snowed. Same bend, same posture, same vanishing as the headlights reached it. Then again the week after. By the end of that winter, I expected it. My fear wore down into a kind of wary respect. It never stepped into the road. Never chased the truck. Never appeared anywhere else. It was as fixed to that bend as the guardrail and the warning sign. Some nights, when exhaustion made the cab feel like a small boat moving through a white sea, I found its presence almost comforting. Someone else was out there keeping watch. I asked about the bend at the depot during coffee, pretending it was curiosity about old accidents. The room changed in the way rooms do when a subject has been waiting under the floorboards. The older drivers stopped talking. One of them, Ellis, stirred sugar into his cup for too long and finally said there had been a driver named Paul before my time. Good man. Careful. Knew every road. One February, in a whiteout, his plow went off at that bend. The truck slid down through the trees and rolled into the hollow beyond. They did not find him until morning because the snow covered the tracks almost as fast as he made them. He had stayed with the rig, engine dead, pinned in the cab, waiting for a road crew that did not know he was missing. After that, the figure seemed less like a haunting and more like a duty continued. I began lifting my hand when I approached the bend. A small wave, nothing theatrical. The first few times I felt foolish. Then it became part of the route. Salt the bridge. Angle the blade before the farm lane. Waved to Paul at the bend. The figure still vanished in the headlights, but the road felt less lonely after I acknowledged him. Years passed. Trucks changed. Supervisors changed. The county paved sections that had once been gravel, widened shoulders, replaced signs. The bend remained bad. Snow still gathered there in thick curling drifts. Younger drivers complained about it. I told them to slow down and wave if they saw someone standing by the trees. Some laughed. Some did not. A few came back pale and avoided my eyes. I never pressed them. The strangest night was not the last one, but a storm about 10 years in. Heavy wet snow, the kind that clings to branches until they break. I came around the bend and saw the figure closer to the lane than usual. My headlights had not yet touched him fully, and for a second the amber roof light flashed across his shape. I saw details I had never seen before: the brim of a cap, the squared shoulders of an old county coat, one arm bent as if resting on an invisible steering wheel. Then he was gone. In the snow where he had stood, there was a dark line leading toward the ditch. Not footprints. Tire marks. Faint, old, appearing through the new snow for only a moment before the wind covered them. I stopped the truck. That was against better judgment. Blocking a rural road in a storm is not wise, even at 2 in the morning. But I sat there with the engine idling and looked into the woods. The trees beyond the shoulder were black and close. For a moment, through the falling snow, I thought I saw a glow down in the hollow, like headlights buried deep under years. Then the radio cracked with dispatch asking my status, and the glow was gone. I said road was clear. I drove on. That was when I stopped thinking of Paul as trapped. He was not waiting to be rescued anymore. He was watching the place that killed him, warning the rest of us by standing where our eyes would go. If he vanished in the headlights, maybe that was because his job ended once we slowed enough to see the bend. Maybe the wave was never for his comfort. Maybe it was for ours. My last winter on the plow came quietly. No ceremony, no grand farewell. My knees hurt. My wife wanted me home at night. The county had newer drivers with better backs. On my final shift, snow began just after midnight, light and dry, sparkling in the beams. I took Road 6 even though another driver had that section, because I wanted to see the bend once more. I told myself it was habit. It was more than that. You do not leave a night route without saying goodbye to the things that kept you company. The figure was there. Of course he was. Standing at the edge of the woods, dark coat white at the shoulders, facing the road. I slowed. The plow blade hissed. My hand lifted before I thought about it. For 15 years I had waved into that vanishing place and received only absence. This time, as the headlights reached him, the figure did not disappear immediately. He remained 1 second longer. Long enough to raise his own hand. It was not a dramatic gesture. Just a tired worker's wave at the end of a shift. Recognition. Thanks. Farewell. Then the light took him, or the snow did, and the shoulder was empty again. I had to pull over farther down the road because I could not see through my tears. Not from fear. From the sudden understanding that the dead, if they stay, may stay for reasons as ordinary as ours. A route unfinished. A dangerous curve. A job nobody else can do in quite the same way. I am retired now. When snow falls, I wake at the old hours and listen for plows going by. Sometimes I imagine Paul still at his bend, watching the new trucks come through, waiting for the wave that tells him the road is not forgotten. And when I hear the blade scrape past my own street in the dark, I lift a hand from under the blanket, just in case any night worker, living or dead, needs to know someone inside saw the road come back. After I retired, I visited Paul's grave once. It felt intrusive, but necessary. The cemetery sat on a low hill where snow blew flat between the stones. His marker was simple, county emblem carved in the corner, dates half filled with ice. Someone had left a small toy snowplow at the base. I do not know whether it was family or another driver. I brushed snow from the name and stood there a while, feeling foolish and grateful. Then a gust moved through the bare trees, and from somewhere below the hill came the distant scrape of a blade on pavement, though no road ran close enough for the sound to be that clear. I still take Road 6 sometimes in daylight. The bend has a new guardrail now, bright metal bolted into the frozen shoulder. People probably think that makes it safe. It helps, I suppose. But safety is never only metal and signs. Safety is memory. Someone knowing where to slow. Someone telling the new driver about the drift. Someone standing in the snow long after his own shift ended, making sure the living see the curve before the curve takes them. There is comfort in that, strange as it sounds. Not every haunting wants to drag the living into its misery. Some stand where they fell and keep others from joining them. Some remember the road better than the road remembers itself. When people ask whether I believe in ghosts, I tell them I believe in night shifts. I believe work can get into a person so deeply that even death has trouble taking the keys away. 2 more. Let your breathing slow with the winter wind. Here is the next. The warmth at the window. I want to tell you about the night I almost froze to death, and what I saw, because I've never been sure whether it was trying to save me or take me. My car had slid off a remote mountain road in a snowstorm, deep into a drift, no signal, no traffic, the temperature far below freezing and dropping. I knew the danger. I stayed with the car as long as I could, but the cold crept in, and as the hours passed and no one came, I made the desperate decision to walk, to find shelter before the cold took me. It was the wrong choice. Out in that storm, on foot, I began to freeze. You may know that freezing to death, past a certain point, stops being painful. A warmth comes over you, a drowsiness, a strange peace. That's the cold killing you, but it doesn't feel like dying, it feels like rest. I was deep into that false warmth, stumbling, ready to lie down in the snow and sleep, when I saw the light. A window, glowing warm and golden through the storm, up ahead, a house, a cabin, shelter, warmth, life. I turned toward it with the last of my strength, weeping with relief, and stumbled toward that warm lit window through the snow. As I got closer, I could see into the window, into a warm room, a fire, and figures inside, a family, gathered in the warmth, and they saw me, and they came to the window, and they smiled, and they beckoned. Come in out of the cold. They waved me toward the door, their faces kind and glad, the room behind them glowing with heat and light and safety. I reached the door. I had my frozen hand on it. And some last clear part of me, some stubborn ember, made me look, really look, at the house. And I saw that it was a ruin, a shell, a long abandoned wreck, roofless, windowless. The snow drifted deep inside it, no fire, no family, no warmth, dead and open to the storm for what must have been decades. The warm golden window, the beckoning family, the fire, none of it was there. None of it was real. I had been about to walk through a doorway into a roofless ruin and lie down by a fire that did not exist, and sleep, and freeze, in the arms of a warmth that only wanted me to stop walking. The shock of it, the horror, lit some final reserve in me. I turned from that beckoning ruin and I forced my frozen legs back toward the road, away from the warm false window, and I walked, and somehow, I will never fully know how, I made it to a real road, and real headlights found me, and I lived, with the loss of 2 toes and a lifelong fear of the cold. But I think about the warm window often, about how kind the family looked, how badly I wanted to go in. And I understand now what the cold really is, up in those mountains, that it is patient, and it is cruel, and it does not come at you with ice and wind alone. It comes at you with warmth, with a golden window in the storm, with a family who smile and beckon you in from the cold, into the ruin, to rest forever, by a fire that was never lit. Cold is not dramatic at first. That surprised me. In stories, freezing is violent, teeth chattering, wind screaming, hands clawing at snow. There is some of that, yes, at the beginning. But the real danger is quieter. The cold begins as an enemy and then becomes a comfort. It stops hurting in the places where damage has already been done. It offers bargains. Sit for 1 minute. Close your eyes just once. Rest your face against the snow. It looks soft. That is how it kills you, not by hatred, but by persuasion. I had taken the mountain road because it cut nearly 40 minutes off the drive. In good weather it was beautiful. In winter it was a mistake locals avoided unless they had to. I was not local enough to respect it. The snow was light when I started up, the sort of pretty flurry that makes headlights look cinematic. Halfway over the pass, the wind rose and the pretty snow became a moving wall. The tires lost the road before I understood it had happened. The car slid sideways, dropped into a drift, and stopped with a soft final thud that sounded almost polite. For a while, I did what you are supposed to do. I stayed with the car. I ran the engine in intervals. I cleared the exhaust. I wrapped my legs in spare clothes. I tried the phone until the battery became more valuable as a light than as a hope. No signal. No passing headlights. The road had become one long blank corridor between trees. Snow built up on the windshield until the car felt buried in cotton. Inside, my breath frosted the glass. The decision to walk did not feel like panic at the time. It felt logical. That frightens me now. I told myself the road could not be far from houses. I told myself the car was getting colder anyway. I told myself motion meant survival. People who are beginning to freeze can reason themselves into death with perfect confidence. I left a note on the dashboard, zipped my coat to my chin, and stepped into snow that swallowed my boots. At first, walking warmed me. My legs burned. My breath came hard. The storm erased the car behind me within minutes. I followed the darker trough where the road should have been, though sometimes drifts made it impossible to tell. The trees moved in and out of sight. My flashlight beam turned the snow into a tunnel of glittering needles. After a while, the tunnel was all there was. No past, no destination, only the next few feet of white. My gloves got wet when I fell. That was the first serious mistake. I tried to brush snow from my coat and drove my hands deep into powder. Wet gloves become cold hands, and cold hands become clumsy hands, and clumsy hands make worse decisions. I tucked them under my arms and kept moving. The pain in my fingers sharpened, then dulled. My feet went from aching to wooden. I remember thinking, distantly, that I should be more afraid. Then the false warmth came. It rose from my chest like a little stove being lit inside me. The wind seemed softer. The snow seemed slower. My thoughts loosened and drifted apart. I knew academically that this was bad. I had read about hypothermia. I had told myself, in warm rooms, that I would recognize it and fight it. But recognition is not rescue. A trap can look exactly like a trap and still feel like relief. The light appeared when I had almost decided to sit under a tree. It glowed through the storm ahead and to the left, warm gold, unmistakably human. A window. Not the blue-white glare of a headlight, not a reflection, but the square, steady comfort of a lit room. I cried when I saw it. Actual tears that froze on my cheeks. The sight of that window reached some buried child part of me that believed light means home, and home means saved. As I staggered closer, details formed around the light. A house, low and dark against the trees. Smoke, or something like smoke above the roof. Curtains open. Inside, a room with amber walls, a fire moving in a hearth, and figures turning toward me. A family. I still remember them with unbearable tenderness. A woman with gray hair. A man in a red sweater. 2 children near the fire. They did not look surprised to see me. They looked glad. As if they had been waiting with dinner warm. The woman lifted a hand and beckoned. "Come in." The man pointed toward where the door must be. The children pressed close to the glass, smiling. Their faces were kind. That is the detail that makes people uncomfortable when I tell it. They want the vision to have been monstrous, faces wrong, eyes black, mouths too wide. It was not like that. It was worse because it was perfect. The exact image a freezing person would crawl toward. Not horror, but mercy. I reached the porch. My shoulder brushed rotten wood, though I did not understand that yet. The golden room still filled the window. The family still beckoned. My hand found a door handle so cold it stuck briefly to my glove. I was seconds from opening it. Then a gust tore sideways through the trees and cleared the snow from my flashlight beam. The beam swung over the wall beside the door, and the wall was not there. The house was a ruin. Half collapsed. Roof open to the storm. Window frame empty, glass long gone. Snow drifted inside in smooth white dunes. The hearth was a black hole full of ice. There was no room. No fire, no family, no golden light. My hand was on the door of a shell that could not keep out wind, let alone save a life. The warm window had been painted over emptiness, placed there for me like bait over a pit. I think the shock saved me by making me angry. Fear might have folded me. Grief might have made me lie down, but anger put heat back into me, a ragged little spark. I screamed at the empty window. I do not remember what I said. The golden room flickered once, as if disappointed, and for half a second I saw both things at once, the ruin framed full of snow, and behind it the kind family still smiling, still asking me to come in from the cold. Then the light vanished completely. Walking away from it was the hardest thing I have ever done. Every part of my freezing body wanted that false warmth to be true. Even knowing it was a ruin, I had to fight the desire to turn back. The cold had shown me exactly what I needed, and need is stronger than belief. I stumbled toward the road by refusing to look behind me. Once I heard a child call from the house. Just one word. Please. It was not pleading for help. It was inviting me to accept it. Real headlights found me some time before dawn. A utility crew, out checking lines after the storm broke. They said I was walking in the middle of the road without seeming to know where I was. They said I fought them when they tried to put me in the truck because I kept saying the house was not warm. The house was not warm. In the hospital, after, I learned about the toes. I learned how close I had come. Doctors like numbers. They told me temperatures and times and percentages. None of them explained the window. Later I searched records for that road. There had been a house there once, abandoned after a fire in the 70s. A family had died in it, people told me, but that turned out not to be true. No tragic children. No woman with gray hair. No man in a red sweater. The ruin had no story dramatic enough to explain what I saw. That frightens me more. It means the cold did not borrow ghosts from the house. It made its own. Now I respect winter in a way that is almost religious. I do not romanticize snow from inside cars. I do not trust shortcuts over passes. And when I see a warm window shining in a storm, even a real one, even my own, I remember that warmth can be a lure as easily as a shelter. The cold does not always come with teeth. Sometimes it comes with a fire, a family, and a hand at the glass, welcoming you to lie down where no roof remains. Recovery made the experience feel unreal in a different way. Hospital rooms are warm, but they are also full of fluorescent light and paperwork. Nurses checked my toes. Doctors discussed tissue viability. Friends brought soup. The world insisted on being practical, and practicality has no place for a false family smiling through the window of a roofless ruin. For a while I let the doctors call it hypothermic hallucination because the phrase was clean and useful. It allowed everyone to stop looking uncomfortable. But hallucinations usually belong to the person having them. They draw from memory. I had never seen those people before. Years later, in a diner 2 towns over, I saw a man in a red sweater sitting with his back to me. For 1 second my whole body went cold. When he turned, he was ordinary, a stranger embarrassed by my stare. That is what the window took from me, the ability to trust warmth completely. Even kindness can look like bait once you have seen the cold wear a human smile. The ruin is gone now, I am told. The county tore it down after another storm season, calling it a hazard. I should be relieved, but I am not sure the house mattered. A lure can use any frame. An empty barn. A hunting shed. A porch light seen through snow. The cold only needs an image your dying mind is willing to trust. That is why I carry flares and blankets in my car now, and why I never believe in sudden warmth without touching the wall behind it. Last one now. Let this be the one you fall asleep to. The thing that waits for the thaw. I spent a winter in a tiny, remote mountain village. The kind of place that gets completely cut off by snow for months. A handful of old families who've lived there for generations, deeply traditional, deeply superstitious. I was an outsider, there for work, and they were kind to me but guarded, and it took most of the winter before one of the old women trusted me enough to tell me why the village did the strange thing it did every spring. Why, when the thaw finally came, they did not celebrate. Why the coming of spring, in that village, was a time of dread. All winter, she explained, while the snow lay deep over the mountains, something slept beneath it. Up in the high country, under the great drifts, something old lay dormant in the frozen ground, sleeping through the cold the way bears do, the way the whole frozen world does. And in the spring, when the thaw came and the snow melted and the ground softened and warmed, it woke. It woke hungry, after its long winter sleep, and it came down from the high country, and the village's old traditions, all of them, every strange spring ritual, were about one thing, making sure that when the thing woke and came down, it found the offerings the village left for it, and was satisfied, and went back up the mountain, instead of coming into the village to take what it was owed. I didn't believe her, of course. Outsiders never do. But I stayed into the early spring, and I saw the village prepare, saw the dread grow as the snow began to soften, saw the old rituals performed with deadly seriousness, the offerings laid out at the tree line, the doors marked, the long night when no one left their homes and everyone kept the old words ready. And on the first true night of the thaw, alone in my lodging, I heard it come down. I heard something vast and slow and newly woken move through the softening snow at the edge of the village, heard it pause at the offerings left at the tree line, heard the long silence as it considered whether the village had remembered its debts. The whole village held its breath in the dark. And then I heard it turn, satisfied, and move back up the mountain, into the high country, to wait out the short summer and the autumn until the snows came again, and it could sleep once more. I left that village as soon as the roads cleared, and I never went back, and I've never told this story to anyone who'd believe it. But every spring, now wherever I am, when the last snow melts and the ground thaws and the world wakes up warm and green and lovely, I feel a small cold dread that I can't shake. Because I know now that the thaw isn't only the world coming back to life. In some old, deep, forgotten places, the thaw is something waking up. Something that slept all winter under the snow, and rises hungry when the ground grows warm, and comes down looking for what it's owed. And I wonder how many villages still remember the rituals, and how many have forgotten. And what comes down, every spring, to the ones who've forgotten, to collect a debt they no longer even know they owe. The village did not appear on most maps at a useful scale. It sat in a fold of the mountains where the road narrowed to one lane and then seemed to lose interest in continuing. The houses were stone and dark timber, built close together as if for warmth or defense. In winter the snow climbed the walls and narrowed the lanes until people moved through trenches from door to door. Smoke hung low over the roofs. Bells sounded strange there, muffled by drifts before the echoes could reach the slopes. I was there to document old seasonal land use, which sounds very reasonable and academic until you are the outsider asking people to explain customs they do not consider customs. To them, the spring rituals were not folklore. They were maintenance. You shovel roofs because snow is heavy. You stack wood because nights are cold. You mark doors and leave offerings at the tree line because the thaw comes. These things belong to the same category in their minds. Necessary acts performed by serious people. Through December and January, nobody spoke of spring except in practical terms. How much hay remained? Which roofs needed clearing? Whether the upper path would hold until March. But as the light began to change, I felt the village change with it. The sun lingered on the slopes. Icicles began to drip at noon. The snow developed a crust in the morning and a wet heaviness by afternoon. Children who had shouted in the lanes all winter were called indoors earlier. Dogs refused to go near the upper woods after dusk. The old woman who finally told me the story was named Anika. She had hands twisted by work and eyes so pale they seemed made of winter sky. I had been helping carry sacks of flour from the storehouse, mostly to make myself useful, and she watched me struggle with one before taking the other end without comment. Afterward she gave me tea so bitter it felt medicinal and asked what I had written about the village. I showed her some notes. She read the page about spring offerings and tapped it with one finger. "You wrote festival," she said. "Cross that out." So I crossed it out. She told me that the thing under the snow was not a spirit, not exactly, and not an animal, though people had used both words when they were careless. It was older than the church, older than the road, older than the village in its present form. In winter, when the high ground froze deep, it slept beneath the drifts where avalanches settled and trees grew twisted from the wind. The snow held it down, or soothed it, or fed it dreams. Anika was not interested in explaining the biology of the impossible. She cared about the rule. When the thaw loosened the mountain, it woke hungry. The offerings had changed over generations. Once, she said, they had been larger and sadder. Goats, then lambs, then blood in bowls, then bread and salt and smoked meat when the priests forbade older ways, then carved wooden figures when even meat became scarce. The form mattered less than remembrance. The village had to show that it knew a dead existed. Forgetting was the danger. Not poverty. Not even disrespect. Forgetting. I asked what happened if the offerings were not left. Anika looked toward the window, where meltwater ticked steadily from the eaves. She said there were empty houses in the village for a reason. "Families die," I said, because I wanted a normal answer. She nodded. "Yes. Families die. Sometimes all on the same spring night, with doors still barred from the inside and no tracks leading away except one wide path going back up through the thawing snow. After that, I noticed preparations everywhere. Children were taught old phrases under their breath. Men repaired shutters that had survived storms, but apparently needed reinforcement for spring. Women baked dense dark loaves that were not eaten. Red thread appeared around gate latches. Ash was mixed with something and smeared in a small mark above each door. No one hurried. No one dramatized. That made it worse. Panic can be dismissed. Routine cannot. The first true thaw announced itself with sound. All winter, the village had been quiet under snow. Then came dripping, sliding, cracking, the soft collapse of cornices from roofs, the hidden rush of water under packed lanes. The mountains seemed to wake in layers. During the day, sunlight flashed on wet stone. By evening, fog rose from the snowfields as if the ground were breathing. People finished their work early and went indoors before dusk. Doors closed one after another. The lanes emptied. Even the dogs were silent. I had been told to stay inside my lodging, keep the lamp low, and not open the door until the church bell rang after dawn. I obeyed mostly because every skeptical part of me had been worn down by the seriousness of the village. I set my recorder on the table, not because I believed it would capture anything, but because documentation was the last refuge of my pride. Outside, the fog thickened. Somewhere uphill, beyond the last houses, the offerings waited at the tree line. It came after midnight. I did not see it at first. I heard the thawing snow except wait. A slow compression. A wet settling. Then another. The sounds were too far apart for human steps and too deliberate for sliding snow. Something large was moving down from the high woods. The recorder on the table registered only a faint low distortion, but in the room I felt each movement in my ribs. The lamp flame bent toward the door, though no draught entered. The village held itself still. I understood that stillness as a communal act. No baby cried. No chair scraped. No one coughed behind the thin walls. Every person in every house was listening to the same descent, measuring whether the offerings would be enough. The steps stopped near the tree line. For a long time nothing happened. That silence was the longest moment of my life. I pictured the thing bending over the bread, the salt, the carved figures, whatever else they had left. Considering. Remembering previous years. Smelling the village below. Then came a sound I can only describe as satisfaction, though it was not a sigh, not a growl, not any animal noise I know. Snow slid from the roof of my lodging in a heavy sheet. The lamp went out. In the dark, the sound turned away. The slow steps moved back uphill, deeper into the fog, toward the high country where winter still held in shaded gullies. No one moved until the church bell rang at first light. In the morning, the offerings were gone. Not scattered. Not eaten in any ordinary way. Gone. The snow around the tree line had melted in a wide dark patch, exposing old grass pressed flat beneath. Through that patch ran a trail leading up the mountain. It was not footprints. It was a broad trough, as if something heavy had dragged itself over the softening ground, though nothing touched the mud at the edges. Steam rose from it in the cold morning air. I left when the road opened, carrying notebooks that suddenly felt childish. Anika gave me bread for the journey, and told me not to write the village name. I asked why she had told me at all if outsiders were not meant to know. She said because outsiders forget fastest, and forgetting spreads. Then she touched the door mark above her own house and added that remembrance does not require belief, only repetition. Years later, in cities far from that mountain, spring still unsettles me. People celebrate the first warm day. They open windows, wear light clothes, speak of renewal. I understand that joy, but beneath it I hear dripping eaves in a village that went silent at dusk. I see red thread on latches. I imagine high snowfields softening around an old shape beginning to stir. The thaw is not only an ending. It is an opening. Things sealed by cold are released. Roads return, rivers move, roots wake, bones surface. And in places older than our explanations, something else may wake too, hungry not only for food but for proof that the little warm houses below still remember the dead. I do not know how many villages still leave offerings. I do not know how many have converted the ritual into decoration, then into story, then into nothing. But each spring, when the last snow pulls back from the hills, I think of the forgotten places. I think of doors unmarked. I think of people sleeping through the night of the thaw, unaware of the slow steps coming down from the high country to collect what memory used to provide. I did write about the village, but not for publication. The notes are in a folder in my desk, labeled with a false place name. Sometimes I open them in winter and read the ordinary details: roof pitch, grazing patterns, storage customs, dialect terms for snow. Then I find the pages from the thaw night, and the handwriting changes. It gets larger, less academic. At one point I wrote only, "Listen to the village." I do not remember writing that, but it remains the most accurate sentence in the file. The last I heard, the village had begun to empty. Young people leaving, old people dying, houses bought by outsiders who wanted summer retreats and mountain views. I wonder what they were told about spring. I wonder whether anyone showed them the tree line, the marks above the doors, the old words to say when the fog comes off melting snow. Traditions can look quaint from a distance. Up close, some of them are locks. I worry about the day someone paints over the marks because they spoil the photographs. I worry about a thaw night when the offerings are decorative, insufficient, or absent, and something old comes down hungry into a village that no longer remembers how to be afraid in the right way. Maybe every place has something it must remember on behalf of the living. Coastal towns remember tides. Desert towns remember thirst. Mountain villages remember what sleeps under snow. Modern people call that superstition because we like dangers with names and measurements. But old rules often survive because someone broke them once and the survivors needed a way to explain what not to do again. The village did not fear spring because it hated life returning. It feared everything that returned with it. And if sleep comes before the last thought finishes, let it. The storm does not need an audience. Snow can fall without being watched. Wind can move along the roof without being named. Somewhere inside the story, doors remain closed, radios remain silent, roads remain marked by amber lights, and old villages keep their careful promises to the thaw. Somewhere outside the story, your own room stays ordinary and safe. The blanket is not a fragile thing. It is enough for tonight. The walls are enough. The lock is enough. Your breathing is enough. Let the cold pass by without taking anything from you. Let the dark be only space. Let the last image be warmth, not the false kind at a ruined window, but the real kind that gathers slowly around a person who has finally stopped listening for footsteps in the snow. Rest now. The storm can spend itself against the world without your help. By morning, the snow will be only snow, the road only road, the lake only ice, and the window only glass. Until then, stay warm, stay still, and let every impossible thing remain far outside, where the night keeps it, beyond the locked door, beyond the curtain, beyond the reach of your breathing. Safe under the covers tonight. There are nights when the safest thing a person can do is nothing at all. Not check the porch. Not lift the curtain. Not follow the sound down the hall or lean close to the glass. Just stay where the warmth is, let the strange thing remain strange, and allow distance to do its quiet work. Curiosity belongs to daylight. At night, especially in winter, restraint is a kind of shelter. Maybe that is the hidden lesson in every story tonight. The people who lived did not defeat the dark. They did not solve it. They did not name it correctly and make it harmless. They simply refused the invitation at the important moment. They kept walking. They kept the door shut. They did not tap back. They left before the next storm. Sometimes survival is not a heroic act. Sometimes it is a small refusal repeated until morning. Let that refusal become rest now. You do not need to open any door in your mind. You do not need to follow any track to its source. You can let unanswered things remain outside the circle of lamplight. The night can keep its secrets, and you can keep your warmth. One more thing before the night lets go. There is a reason these winter stories work so well with rain or wind in the background. Weather makes a room feel held. It gives the dark a texture that is outside you, not inside you. It says the world is moving, but you do not have to move with it. You can listen without answering. You can drift without going anywhere. That is what these tapes are for. Not to trap you in fear, but to give fear a shape and then set it down at the edge of sleep. A circle in snow. A knock at a door. A voice in a radio. A third path in powder. A face under ice. A figure at a bend. A golden window in a ruin. A hunger under thawing drifts. Each one can stay in the story where it belongs. Each one can fade as the room gets heavier and the night grows softer. The snow outside the stories keeps falling. It covers sharp tracks. It fills old hollows. It lays a clean white silence over roads, roofs, fields, and trees. By morning, Even frightening things can look distant. By morning, the world is practical again. Kettles, boots, engines, shovels, daylight. But you do not have to reach morning by effort. Sleep will carry you most of the way there. So breathe in slowly, and let the winter air and the story stay far from your skin. Breathe out, and let the last of the footprints blur behind you. Nothing is circling your room. Nothing is waiting at your door. Nothing is describing you from the static. Nothing is walking beside your bed. The cold has its own country, and you are not in it tonight. And if the storm outside your own window seems a little too quiet now, let it be quiet. Quiet does not always mean waiting. Sometimes quiet is only snow settling on roofs, wind moving past corners, branches resting under their white weight. Tonight there is no cabin door to open, no frozen lake to cross, no mountain trail behind you showing one track too many. There is only the room you are in, the soft dark around the edges of it, and the steady knowledge that you are not out there in the weather. Think of the house from the first tape, but only as a house after morning, curtains drawn, stove cooling, the strange circle hidden by fresh harmless snow. Think of the cabin, but only after sunrise, when the door remains closed and the voice has gone back into the storm. Think of the radio, but only as a quiet box on a table, its switches down, its speaker dark. Think of the trail, but only before anyone looks back. Think of the lake, but covered in clouded ice no one needs to cross. Think of the plow road, cleared and salted, amber light disappearing safely around the bend. Think of the warm window, but make it real this time, your own window, your own room, your own heat. Think of the mountain village after the thaw night, when the bell rings at dawn and people open their doors to find the offerings gone and their homes untouched. Winter makes people small, but small can be safe. A small room. A small lamp. A small blanket pulled up to the chin. A small breath in, a small breath out. The mind may wander to the snowfields and the roads and the dark timberline, but the body knows where it is. It knows the mattress underneath you, the pillow near your cheek, the warmth gathered under the covers. Let the body know first. Let the mind follow later. If a sound comes from the hallway, it is the building settling. If the window ticks, it is temperature changing the glass. If the wind presses at the door, it is only wind. Stories borrow ordinary sounds and dress them in shadow, but when the tape ends, the ordinary sounds can become ordinary again. The storm is allowed to be a storm. The night is allowed to pass without asking anything from you. So leave the roads to the plows. Leave the lakes to the ice. Leave the old mountain rules to the villages that remember them. Leave the footprints outside, if there are any, to be softened by morning snow. You do not have to investigate. You do not have to answer. You do not have to prove that you are brave. Rest is brave enough on a winter night. The room is warm. The door is locked. The storm is outside. Let that be the last shape your thoughts make before sleep. That is all the tapes for tonight. You made it to the end, or maybe the sound of the wind and the snow carried you off to sleep somewhere along the way. That is all right. That is what this is for. The storm will keep blowing as long as you need it. The stories are done now. There is nothing left but the wind against the windows, the soft hiss of snow in the dark, and the warmth around you. The dark is just the dark. The cold is outside. You are inside. The door is locked, and you will not open it, no matter who knocks out of the snow. Let your shoulders go heavy. Let your jaw loosen. Let your hands rest. The night can watch itself for a while. You do not have to keep watch with it. The tracks outside are only shadows. The radio is quiet. The lake is far away. The road is cleared. The window is only a window. The bed is warm, and the storm cannot reach you here. If you want more, the next tape is already waiting. But for now, rest. Sleep well, where it is warm. And I will see you again, next time, after midnight.